how much water is dripping out of that. Our vegetables are mostly water, 90-odd%. And of course, they need to be watered in order that we get the harvest that we want. Our vegetables need precious water. As you can see, I've just cut this cabbage in half that we've just picked. And just how much it is reliant on water to keep it crisp. And tasting lovely, and actually the smell from this, which obviously you guys cannot appreciate, but the smell from it is just absolutely amazing. But of course, water is a precious commodity. Sometimes it falls out of the sky, sometimes it doesn't. Here in the UK, we get lots of rain during the sort of winter period, but we don't see so much during the summer period. Now, we've had quite a few people that have asked if we can make a video on how myself and Mrs. W manage watering this vegetable garden of ours. So in today's video, that's just what we're going to do. Before we even get any water to water our plants, there's a couple of things that we do need to discuss. The first thing you want to be doing is to prepare your soil in the best way that you can. So incorporate plenty of well-rotted matter. It could be compost, it could be manure, but get something in there that can hold on to the moisture when it does rain. But equally, from spring onwards, if you cover your soil with a mulch, that will stop all the water that does come evaporating and keep it in your soil. Now, of course, with us being New Dig, we already mulch our soil with compost. So you can see that just by having that mulch on, look how that soil is damp underneath. And so our plants are able to access the moisture that is in the ground.
That is actually really...
That's after. This is our 3rd year of being New Dig. So after 3 years, we can actually get down into and get to our soil.
In July.
In July.
Couldn't
Yeah,
before.
and July. In July, as you say. And it's a good growing medium. But contrast that with this over here, this particular part of this border here.
This is probably one of the only parts of our garden that we haven't turned over to.
It's not New Dig. Look how many weeds are trying to sprout. There's moss trying to come along, all sorts. And then I can't get that fork any further down than that, and I can assure you, I really am pushing. But that, although there's moisture there, don't get me wrong, there is moisture there, but it's so hard.
That was how we gardened when we first came here, Barry. I
Yeah.
don't ever want to go back to that again.
No, not at all.
No.
But in really dry years with our clay soil, it just dries to a really, really hard crust. Look at this, look. It's really quite difficult to get in there compared to our New Dig soil. Now the next important thing to get set up are your water butts. Anywhere where you can get guttering on, that you can filter water into water butts, is going to be able to give you lots of water in order that you can water your plants. We happen to have 1, 2, 3, 4 water butts here. They're all ganged together so that as water feeds into it and they become full, like this one is, Mrs. W.
That was that rain we had the other day. Oh yeah, look at that. Lovely.
So you can see that's lovely and full.
That was the rain when it nearly blew the pea arch over.
I think you're right, yeah. But then, as that's actually filling up, it then fills this one up. You can see the pipe that leads from here. And you can gang these together in order that you keep filling water butts up. So I've actually filled this watering can with some water from our butts. And now we can look at watering. The first thing we're going to do is look at how we direct sow our carrots. Now you can see that I've made some drills in the soil. When you put the roos on your watering can, the water goes everywhere, and what we want is the water really where it can do the best for us. So as we've done these drills, what we really want to do is to just fill these with water. Because what we do know is that when these have been watered, the water is actually going to the place where the seeds are. Now, the one thing you don't want to be doing is to be sowing your seeds first and then using a watering can like this with no rows on it, because it will just disperse your seeds everywhere. So we should let that soak into the ground, and then we're going to sow our carrots, our main crop carrots, that will give us food over the autumn period and winter. Now what we have done is to give that another water. So you saw me water the drill once, we've watered it once again. The water is concentrated in the position that it needs to be in. I just need to sort of wait for that to soak in order that we can sow the seed. Now while we're here, I thought we'd just have a look at the Amsterdam Maxi that are growing, and yeah, they're not too bad, Mrs. W.
They're not.
They actually go quite a fair way down into the ground, and there are nonce type carrots, so actually when we chop them up, we'll smell that.
We can.
I think our Maggie is going to really like those.
I think she probably will.
Oh, look at that, look.
Those.
Look at those.
Lovely, lovely. Harvest.
They smell even more carroty, you know.
I have to say, I'm sorry that I have a preference, but the Norwich are my favourites.
Yeah. I think we'll be using those this evening. So, the water has soaked in, and it is actually really quite time that we got our main crop carrots in. For the last 2 to 3 seasons, we have been using a variety called Eskimo wheat, Mrs. W.
That's that oxalis. It's hard to get on top of that one.
And like the carrots we sowed earlier in the year, this particular company has made sure that we can see the seed and the colour of it, so that once we're sown, we can see actually just how thinly we have sown it. This is not good news for me, Mrs. W.
No, I'm going to be marking you out of 10. We're watching you, Wilson. I do believe you could be getting better.
Hands up who wants to see Mrs. W again.
I could be buried in the garden.
So, Mrs. W, how many marks do I get out of 10 for the sewing?
In the bit that I saw you do, probably a 7. But the rest of it's definitely 10 out of 10 because that's what I did.
That's been cut out of the film.
No, it's not. It is correct.
So all we need to do now is just cover over the drill. Because we've watered the bottom of the drill, these seeds really aren't going to go very far because they'll be stuck to the bottom of the drill. And these Eskimo carrots we shall be hopefully harvesting from October onwards, maybe even September. It's about 12 weeks from the time you sow carrots until they're actually ready to harvest. So July now, beginning of July, August, September. Yeah, as we head into the beginning of October, we'll have some lovely carrots once again. And these really haven't ever let us down. One thing you do want to remember is that once these are done, I'm going to cover these back over, and they need to be covered back over because the second generation of carrot fly will have hatched and they'll actually want to go after your carrots. So keep them covered and, yeah, keep that carrot fly off. And then within the next 2 weeks, we'll start to see these carrots germinating. And just like our other carrots, what you do need to do is to keep an eye on the weather. If it rains naturally, fine, absolutely amazing. Let's just let them get on with it. But if we go on to have actually a really dry summer from now on, so the rest of July and August into September, then once a week, these will receive a water. And that will save them splitting. Because if these seedlings go weeks without water and then it suddenly lets it down, that's when you get the splitting of the carrots. That's what causes it. A lot of people think it's because you've maybe put manure in the ground or whatever, but actually it is the water. They've gone maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks without water and then the sky absolutely pelts it down. That's what will make them split. And that's how we water things when we want to direct sow. And for us, that is only carrots and parsnips. We've put some compost into this seed module tray, and then we've stood it in water for a little while. It's not something that we always do, but when water is getting a bit tight on resources, then we choose to do this. Now, I've talked quite a bit about successional planting. So it's another reminder for you, Ken, as you said on the last comment. And I'm going to be sowing some winter cabbage that should be ready next February, March and April. It's a variety called Wintersa. And by sowing now, we get harvest from February up to next April. And as you saw us do last time, we're aiming for 2 seeds per cell. And then we shall thin to the strongest seedling.
We haven't grown these ones before, have they?
No, they are a new variety to us. You're quite right, Mrs. W. They are a new variety to us. But one of our old favourites is a variety called Ormskirk. We know that they produce cabbages. And because I'm trying some different varieties, I also want to run alongside of those that we know grow very well and produce harvest for us, so that we always have something. And again, just like the last time, we're going to aim for 2 seeds per cell. Unlike the winter sour, these are not F1. These are an open pollinated seed. But they have, over the years, always given myself and Mrs. W a reliable harvest.
Yeah, they have.
And I'll just cover them with a bit of compost. We've already labelled them, and because we've already watered from below on this occasion, then the compost is quite moist from below. So what happens when we want to plant a module grown seedling? Well, what we do is just dib the hole and then fill it up with water. We just need to wait for that to soak down. But what we do need is for there to be water at the bottom of that planting hole, so that when I put this module sown seedling in, it can immediately get some water so that it survives once we put it in. But then what we then go on to do is we don't give it really any more water for the next week, couple of weeks, depending on how the weather is. But in the main, by doing this, once we plant the seedling in here, there's enough water for that to get established. But by not watering that again for the next week or two, then it will get its roots down into the ground to find the water that's actually in there, as opposed to us just to keep giving it water. If we were just to keep giving it water every day, every other day, once it's been planted, what it's going to do is it's going to keep its roots near the surface. And given that this plant is a cabbage, that stalk you see there could become this long, and then when the wind blows, it will just rock it, and it won't grow so well. So it's really important that these roots actually do find their way down into the ground. And you can see in that hole there is just about drained away. So all we need to do is to pop this in here, push down, and that will be absolutely fine. And this is exactly how these plants were planted into the ground. This is a week ago. This is the last video that you saw where I finished planting up plot 3, and look how much they've just grown in the last week. And we did exactly the same, just water the holes, pop the plants in, and they've not had any further water this coming week. In fact, not any of the plants. Got to tell you though, Mrs. W, the radishes are coming on really quite nice.
I hadn't noticed. I thought they were all leaf, but look at those.
Look at those, look.
Nice.
They're lovely. They can go on the barbecue for us tonight.
Beautiful little catch crop. I love catch crops.
Exactly, and as Mrs. W says, it is a catch crop. You can see that the swede are here. Look how well they've come on since we planted them. They've done so well. And yet, apart from the odd weed that we need to pull, Let's get those out. A bit of oxalis, which we does have quite a lot of in our garden, but they are getting weaker. At one point, we would just be overcome with these, wouldn't we?
Carpet of
Yeah,
oxalis.
exactly, a carpet. You've got that
It was,
exactly bang on right, Mrs. W.
And it's that annoying little weed that once it's got its seeds and you touch the plant, the seeds just explode all everywhere, don't they?
Yeah. But you can see these brassicas, they're well on their way. Have established themselves nicely and are growing away really well. I have heard people say that by watering down in that planting hole, that the plants will just, they won't bother to root down below. They will, because we're doing it just the once, just to help the young seedling become established. And remember, we plant these when they're only like that big.
They follow the water down, don't
Yeah,
they? As the water drains through the soil,
the roots follow their way down.
Chase
And
the water.
yeah, and by not watering for the next week or 2 weeks, their roots do get down and they have a look. And if you doubt us in any way, look at these plants here. These went in, what, 4 weeks ago, is it now, Mrs. W? 3 weeks, actually, I think.
It's 3, I was going to say.
I think it is 3.
4.
Look how the dwarf curly kale has come on.
Yes. And
We've got a potato in there. We need to get that out.
I just saw it.
Yeah, a volunteer.
Yeah.
But then the cavallonero, they've come on. Look how much they've grown. And the sprouts. And all of these plants were put into the ground in exactly the same way that you just saw me transplant that cabbage into that dibbed hole. So here we are in the greenhouse. Now, watering undercover is a completely different thing altogether. Clearly this has glass all over it and the rain can't penetrate in here, so we actually need to ensure that these plants get enough water in order that they can grow and give us the harvest that we want. And I did have a comment in the last video. I think was it Johannesson? It was I think that was his name, wasn't it? Who dropped us a comment and asked about how often we actually feed these plants. We actually feed them once a week. We'll use our comfrey or our nettle feed just to feed these plants once a week. And you can see, considering these plants went in really late, they're doing really quite well. They didn't go in until June. Normally we would have our tomatoes in by beginning of May, but it was so cold here in Norfolk that we just couldn't do that. But you can see there's lots of tomatoes forming. Hopefully it won't be too long before we see those ripen and we can enjoy that lovely, lovely taste of homegrown tomatoes that you just can't beat.
I can't wait for that. And neither can Maggie's granddad, Ralph.
No, Ralph can't either, can
Ralph
he?
is patiently waiting
yeah,
for ripe tomatoes.
He is. He is indeed. But this video is all about watering. So what about watering? Well, in the greenhouse, we water every 2 to 3 days. Everything gets a good water, and I mean a good water. If the weather turns out a bit later on in the year to be more like last year, where we had the high 30s, 40°C temperatures, then it needs watering every single day. Because it gets so hot in here, these plants will just melt.
We did last year actually also put some shading on the outside. For the
that's another thing.
First time ever that to try to protect them a little bit.
Yep.
And
yeah, you can put shading on, and as you say, for the first time ever, we put that on our greenhouse last year. It was just so hot. 40°C is just... I know there's a lot of you guys out there in other parts of the world that watch our channel, and you regularly get that sort of temperature, and you know exactly what to do.
We're just learning.
Over here in the UK, we're just learning to start to cope, as you say, Mrs. W, with temperatures that high, and the things we can do to negate that and make sure we bring our crops on. So if you ever think that your comments are not well received, please don't. We love every single one of your comments, because every comment you put helps us understand how we need to grow our plants and the things we need to do to bring those onto a harvest. They're so valuable, each and everybody's comments, from up there in Scotland where it might be a bit cooler, and how you manage to get crops in the shorter growing season you've got, to you guys that are over there in the United States, and where it can be really, really hot, and how you manage to get a harvest from your garden. And of course, for people like Paula and even Frank, who we often get comments from, I can't believe how the temperature swing can be so much. You can go from freezing cold temperatures to absolutely boiling hot temperatures within the week. I take my hat off to you all. But those comments that you leave us, believe you me, they are so much appreciated, because we can all learn from you. Now, the greenhouse is looking actually really quite good. You can see that the Pachysandra cucumber is really, well, it's on a rampant. Right charge. It's exactly, it's rampant, Mrs. W. And after our last video, we said B had grown Pachysandra after we'd talked about it, and she actually confirmed it was her, because I was a bit concerned that perhaps I got that wrong. Memory's not so good these days. But if you're wondering, because you haven't grown it, and you're wondering what sort of harvest both she and we are getting, well, that's a Pachysandra cucumber. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. And just the right size for both myself and Mrs. W. And of course, if we have company, we have 2 or 3 more on there. We just cut
They are
a couple.
quite a prolific fruiter, aren't they?
They really are.
I really enjoy those.
They really are. You can see our peas are looking really good. They're ready. And what we have done is that we've given these peas some water over the last couple of weeks. So as soon as we sort of see them like this, the flowers have gone over and we've got some pods, then it's really advantageous to water these in order that we can get the peas to swell, and that we can get harvest just like this. Oh, look at those, Mrs. W.
Oh, yes. Superb.
Ah.
My favourites. Favourite harvest from the garden until another one comes along, like tomatoes.
Oh, yes. Things like potatoes, once they get a month or so from their harvest, it's really advantageous to give them a good watering. Not a sprinkle, a good watering, because then it'll help those tubers swell up and you get a good harvest of potatoes. So our cabbages and cauliflowers, we don't ever really water them that much. Their roots will find the water way down into the ground. It's only if it becomes really, really hot, like it did last year, 40-degree temperatures, that we then need to look at watering everything just to keep them alive.
That's why we are actually looking at more water butts, aren't we, to try to...
Exactly. We want more water butts, yes, so we can collect more water in order that we can actually give those plants water without using this. This costs me money. So anytime I can use water from the butts to water our plants, so much the better. As we said earlier, if you can use things like mulches for your ground, then you can get lovely harvests like this. Look at these red currants that are now starting to become ready for harvest. And I can assure you, myself and Mrs. W have never, ever given those a water. They're literally taking water out of the ground. Same with the raspberries. Same with the gooseberries. Gooseberries are just about ready for a harvest, Mrs. W.
I know they are. They are desperate for a harvest. Tomorrow, I think.
So plan your watering and decide, you know, what you're going to prioritise to water. Now, of course, we've had this plant some time now. It's a well-established plant, so the roots will be really deep and can be taking water out of the ground. But you're watching this video and you think, actually, I'd love to have some red currants, and you buy one of the, the plants as we do, and they're about that big, first going into the ground, then you need to prioritise that watering, because it will need water to get itself established. Whereas, as I said, this, we haven't watered at all this year.
Only the rain.
Only the rain, exactly. Only the rain. Same with the raspberries, same with the blackberries, and the same with those lovely gooseberries. Getting super excited to be harvesting all this, Mrs. W.
I do wonder whether to have another go at making some gooseberry wine.
Oh yes. You also need to prioritise things like this, raised beds. These will dry out really, really quickly if you don't give them water. And I can see here that we've got some courgettes on the way, Mrs. W. Some lovely yellow courgettes. And actually, the outdoor cucumbers are on their way.
Oh, is this the Market Moor one?
This is the Market Moor.
Oh, let's have a look. Let me see if I can get there. Oh yeah, a little baby cucumber. We haven't had these before, have we? So they're quite excited about those.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Let's face it, we get excited about any harvest, don't we? Now, this video was actually filmed over a couple of days. And on the other day we were filming, it started to rain. So we don't need to water anything. Amazing, just brilliant. But we do know that at this time of the year, this kind of weather is becoming much more rare. It used to be the norm when I was a young man, but yeah, these days it becomes much rarer to have these weeks where we see 2 or 3 days with rain and 2 or 3 days with sunshine. So we don't quite have the mix that we used to have. But in summary, I just wanted to say that when it comes to watering, I would prioritise things with seedlings, because they're only just in a module. They're going to die on you pretty quickly if you don't keep them moist. They don't need to be drenched, but just keep them moist so that their roots can keep growing and power that growth. The next thing that I would prioritise, actually at this time of the year in particular, is the greenhouse. Yeah, anything that you're growing under cover, whether it be polytunnel or a greenhouse, because, again, water can't penetrate in here. Without you watering it, these plants get no water. And if you really are getting extremely hot temperatures, it doesn't take long before, the plants start to show signs of severe stress. Because we haven't had those temperatures this year, actually, a really good thing, if Mrs. W just turned the camera, if you look back on our videos last year, we were talking about the leaf curl, because the tomatoes were becoming stressed, and they naturally do that. Not this year, but much more. Well, not yet, that's true. It is only very early July. Now, after the greenhouse, or any undercover structure, I would then prioritise the raised bed, because they do dry out pretty quickly. And then the next thing would be anything that's coming close to its harvest. Give that some water to boost the size of the harvest that you are going to get. The other thing that I just wanted to say was that ordinarily we don't really water these plots where we grow the vegetables outside. They normally look after themselves. As I say, we'll go back and give them some water, some timely water when it comes time to harvest. But all the time they're growing, we don't ordinarily go and water them. Unless, of course, we have conditions like last year, where I think we went from something like mid-July until October before we saw any meaningful rain, didn't we? So sort of, for us here in the UK anyway, that's, drought conditions for us. It's unusual for us to actually have that kind of period. But actually, even if that period is more than 2 weeks, if you've got that kind of drought conditions, then there'll be times when you need to get out there and water those plots. And we always adopt a policy of watering everything once a week. Not every day, once a week. But give them a really good watering. Now we wish you a really good gardening week, and we shall catch you on the next one.